You're listening to the Seahawks Insiders.
Gino looks, going to lay it up over the top. Got a man out there. It is locking. He's got it. Touchdown, Seahawks.
Getting you ready for Seahawks football every Sunday.
Hurts drops back, has time, loads up, throws. A.J. Brown, the defense. It's intercepted. Does he keep his feet in? He does. Seahawks ball.
Presented by Delta, the official airline of the Seahawks. Now, here's your host, Jen Mueller.
We are broadcasting from the Seahawks podcast studio presented by Sony, the official headphones partner of the Seattle Seahawks. Jen Mueller alongside John Boyle. And I have I don't know if sobering is the realization that I came up with, John, but I was so proud of myself for doing Christmas shopping early this year.
Wow.
Like, I'm talking about, I bought presents back in September.
Is that even Christmas shopping?
I know, it was.
That's
It
just
was.
shopping.
I had the best, I was so dialed into this. You want to know where those Christmas presents are still sitting? In my guest room, not wrapped. And I realized I did it so early that I have forgotten they still need to be sent out.
Oh, see, I thought you were going to forget who they were for.
No, I have that list written down. I knew not to trust
Or that you bought them
myself
so
on
early
that
you
one.
lost them.
Nope. They're taking up space in the guest room closet and the guest room bed. And so now I have to get those in the mail so that they make them on time.
Excellent.
Are
got
you
time.
in the same boat or no? I mean, I might have time or might not. I might keep forgetting. Who knows?
Yeah. No, we're still working on it. But we're getting there.
Okay, so you haven't forgotten anything. You are still working up to.
I've got a Amazon cart full of things I just need to, hit the button on.
That takes a lot more discipline than I have. Because if it goes in the cart, I'm also just going to hit buy.
Well,
Two different approaches. I say this, and you're going, how does this relate to football?
This is a great open.
How many people do you think forgot about Zach Charbonnet until they saw him run? How many people forgot how good this team could be? Come on, John. Why are you laughing so hard?
That's a reach.
No, it's not. It's a perfect segue in the holiday season.
You do so many good segues. I'm just not sure that was your best one. Okay,
we're not starting off on a great foot today.
All
here,
right,
folks.
I'm sorry.
Look, I do think you forget that Zach Charbonnet could take over a game. I think you might have forgotten what Kenny McIntosh could do in the running game because we really haven't seen him have significant or be able to contribute in a meaningful way since the preseason. I know nobody's forgetting about JSN, but you might be forgetting about DK and Tyler, given how many opportunities JSN has had. And I just think the Seahawks are positioned well, and Arizona showed us a lot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, so often we hear the coaches talk about, we got two backs we really like. They talk about them both like starters, but unless you are running the ball incredibly well and running it 40 times a game, you're just not going to get your backup a ton of touches. So we haven't seen it. He did, Charbonnet did start a couple games early in the year, but for him to break out like that and have that big a game, break off a long run, get some tough physical yards, I mean, it really did show how good a hands this running game is in, that if a guy goes down, they've got, and even as you said, Kenny McIntosh, he, limited touches, but I think he averaged over 5 yards a carry. He looked really good. So you got to like what they're seeing in the backfield.
I wonder how much of that was truly a few scheme changes up front. Because when you talk to Abe Lucas and a couple of those offensive linemen, yes, I know they changed the scheme and they did a little bit more gap instead of zone. How much of that was because it was Zach Charbonnet versus that was always in the game plan, regardless of who your top back was going to be?
Yeah, I don't want to say it's like, Zach Charbonnet made the difference and Ken Walker couldn't have done that, because I think that's not fair to Ken Walker. I just think this is a case of, both backs are really good, and they blocked it up better than they have. I think Ken Walker would have had a big game as well. So, they've struggled to be consistent up front all year, and now that I think we're just starting to see, and this goes to the pass protection too, with no sacks. When you have the same five guys out there for a while, and obviously Abe Lucas being back helps a lot, but you're starting to get a little bit of that continuity, and Sataoa Laumea has really added a nice element to that group as well. But some of it's, they've got three new guys from where they were, what was that, 5-6 weeks ago. Yeah. 3 of the 5 starters are different, and I think they're just kind of coming together as a unit really well.
Well, and you mentioned Sataoa Laumea, and not only did he have back-to-back starts, he got all the first-team reps last week. It wasn't a competition between him and Anthony Bradford. That makes a difference, too, as well as just having real live reps in a game. And Mike McDonald saw a difference in him from his first start to his second.
I think just confidence and consistent performance and execution. So as a rookie, the first time you see things or the first time you see things. So being able to be exposed to all the things you need to be able to react to and the calls and the footwork and all that type of stuff, and then just keep hammering away on the improvements. Again, it wasn't just like, it's not with these guys, it's never going to be this, okay, now I'm ready. It's just this constant effort. Everybody on board. Huff, the coaches, all the rookies going through all the reps, taking them, keep moving forward. There's going to be bumps in the road, but every time this guy took a rep, he just, he was maximizing his opportunity, and that's all you can ask for.
As Mike McDonald just said, like the first game's always going to be a little tough, and you talked to Laumea after that first game, and he's like, yeah, it was a little nervous at first. Took him a little bit to get settled down. So you get past those nerves, and then you also, as you said, get that full week of reps. I just think that week over week growth is going to be really big for him. Early on in his first time starting, it's again, if you can keep all 5 of those guys together, keep them healthy, that could go a long way to this line playing a lot better down the stretch.
And whatever the difference and whatever the reason, it all led to a season high in rushing yards for the team, career highs for Zach Charbonnet, and it sets up a true strength-on-strength matchup against the Green Bay Packers. I mean, truly, across the board on this one, it doesn't matter who's running the ball. You know that Seattle wants to establish the run, and you know that on the other side of this matchup, Green Bay has one of the best running backs in the league. In fact, you would probably hear more about Josh Jacobs if it wasn't for a couple of other backs who are doing some pretty impressive things in Saquon and Derrick Henry. But third most rushing yards in the league, and he's a tough one to bring down.
Man, just a physical runner. He breaks a ton of tackles. I think his yards after contact numbers are pretty dang high. He's kind of a relentless runner, and then yards after contact are tough, but they do a great job of blocking for him as well. And he just has a really good feel for like what the blocking scheme is, kind of where the soft spot is in the defense, and then he's going to hit it with a full head of steam. So he's a really good back. Yeah,
I mean, they've been playing a physical running game all year long. Seahawks fans probably, unfortunately, do not need any reminders about Josh Jacobs. When he was here with the Raiders in, I believe it was 2022. He had a pretty good game, including a walk-off long touchdown run. So, yeah, tough back to deal with. Seahawks have been playing run defense really well since really before the bye against the Rams, but this will be a big test.
When you talk about Josh Jacobs and the number of yards after contact, more than half of his total yards, remember he's got the third most yards in the league, more than half have come after contact. So you're going to have to get a lot of guys to him to bring him down. In addition, when it comes to broken tackles, I believe he has the second most in the league. So you are going to have to get everybody to the ball. And really, Seattle has been able to do that. It's interesting because I was reading some of the opponent viewpoints of this game and saying, look, Seattle struggled against the run. And they pointed to last week where you give up 121 and James Conner has some yards. But John, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking about how that game felt on the sideline. That's another one of those, hey, you can torture the numbers all you want. That's not what it felt like during the game.
It did not feel like they were getting gashed or run on a huge. He did, it was obviously you weren't going to hold him to 8 yards every time you play him like you did in week 12. But yeah, I mean, that did not ever feel like a huge issue. He did, he broke off some nice runs. He's a really good running back. They've run the ball well all year, but I still look at that game and I feel like they're playing good run defense and just kind of the bigger body of work. It's also easy for people who haven't been paying attention to look at the season-long rushing numbers and say, oh, well, here's where the Seahawks average because you're factoring a lot of games. It was almost an entirely different defense from where they are now.
Exactly. And if you look at this 4-game winning streak, the Seahawks defense has allowed just 15.5 points per game. That is tops in the league. Another example of strength on strength against the Packers. During the same period, they are averaging almost 30 points a game. That is 5th best in the league. Do you like this matchup overall? I mean, I love what's on the line, but do you like the overall matchup?
I mean, I like it as like a football fan who thinks it's going to be a very compelling game. If you're a Seahawks fan who's just your main goal is for the Seahawks to win, you don't love it because they're a really tough team. Like this isn't one of those where you look at all the matchups and like, oh, the Seahawks are going to dominate this game. I think they got a great chance to win it and they're going to be competitive. But the way these teams match up, I think it's going to be tough. I mean, like you said earlier. Both teams have been running the ball well lately. Both teams defend the run well. Both teams have been getting a lot of takeaways this season. Seahawks more so lately, but both these teams are doing a lot well lately.
Well, and I want to talk about that in just a second, but if you stick with the Packers offense and what Seattle has to do, it has to be stopping the run.
Yeah.
Because you don't have a true, not just because of Josh Jacobs, But for as good as Jordan Love has been, you don't have a true number one receiver out there. And so those receiving yards have been down quite a bit. In fact, Jordan Love's not attempting the same number of passes that he was earlier in the year.
Yeah, well, ideally, if you have a good running game, he doesn't need to. But yeah, for sure. I mean, every game, every coach and player is going to tell you it starts with stopping the run, but it really feels that way this week to the point you just made. And as this defense has shown in this stretch, when you can stop the run and get teams into these more obvious passing situations, that's where Mike McDonald can, as Devin Weatherspoon would say, he can cook. He said get in his bag. I'm sorry, not cook. Get in his bag, yeah. And then that's
where they could cook. I personally, I would love to
Wait,
cook.
the person who has a cooking show?
I know. I have a cooking show, and I really like to
I'm teeing you up for it. What's it called?
Yeah, I Cook You Measure. Leonard Williams is out. We've got episodes with Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, JSN, and Julian Love.
See, now that's a
up.
segue, Jen.
That is the segue. Way to set me up for that one. Who can actually cook quite a bit is Jordan Love, at least on the field. I have no idea if he can cook off the field.
You should invite him on your show.
We can. It's an open invitation, Jordan. If you'd like to come in and cook with me on I Cook You Measure. Look, even though they're not trying to get the ball down the field, when you look at the overall numbers, and keep in mind, Jordan Love has missed a couple of games this season with injuries. He's 7th in the league with 21 touchdown passes thrown, and he leads a top 10 offense. And while we focus on Josh Jacobs, Jordan Love's quite the playmaker too.
Deep area accuracy is really impressive. His arm talent's really good. He's just got a really good control of their system, operates their offense really well, plays decisive. I think how he extends plays and still gets the ball down the field, even when pressured, is pretty dang good as well. So it's the first time really being exposed to him on like multiple games and stuff. So he's a really good player.
And he seems to be getting healthier and playing cleaner than early in the season. The one, as well as he was playing, the one sort of knock on him was he was throwing a lot of interceptions. For a lot of the first half of the season, he was either at or near the top of the league in interceptions. Now he's gone 3 straight games without throwing one. And, I was talking to one of their writers who covers them, and he said it's mostly just he's healthy. He's been banged up for a lot of the season. He's finally getting healthy. So tough challenge all around this offense.
Well, he's got a clean pocket, though, too.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the total number of sacks allowed by that offensive line. It's 16 sacks. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's the second fewest in the league. And I was asking a few of the Seahawks defensive players this week, is that because he can scramble and, avoid trouble, or is it truly just that clean? And they said, no, he's going to step up in the pocket. He's not going to be Kyler Murray that tries to escape, but they really are doing a good job protecting. I would say the other side of this, and I was talking to AD, the defensive coordinator, last week about the way those guys are rushing, particularly on the interior, and why that looks so different. And he said nobody has the same intent that these guys are playing with right now. Look across the league, and yeah, there's good defensive lines, but these guys have taken it up a notch, to which Jonathan Hankins says, yeah, that's exactly what AD preaches all the time. You got to finish plays, and you have got to finish those blocks this week and make sure that there's no escape routes for Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, any of those guys.
Yeah, and I love the way the Seahawks have been rushing up front, so I think it's good. Another case of kind of strength on strength. They've protected well. Seahawks have gotten after the passer really well, and how about Jonathan Hankins' first sack last week?
How about that?
First sack of the season for the big guy, cleaning up.
Yeah, and he is playing his former team this week in the Packers.
Gotta love
and
it.
He just has a smile on his face all the time. I just love it.
He's having fun out there.
He is having fun.
You gotta love just kind of the grizzled old vet who's just out there enjoying himself, teaching the young guys the game.
I do think that is an underrated part of the game, right? Like you talk about, you got to have a deep rotation to keep these guys healthy, or you talk about the emergence of JSN. Well, somebody has to get less touches, less yards, less reps, less all of that when all these other guys start stepping up. And you have to be unselfish. This is a special group right now. Maybe special is too strong a word. This is a group who totally understands that and buys in. That's how I would say that.
Yeah. And you can throw the edge rushers into that with the D-line, getting Chenna back. We can talk more about that later, but what that's going to do for them down the stretch is he kind of eased in, played 20 snaps last week, but as he builds up and you have that group gets deeper, in terms of just overall talent and depth more than anything, I love that group up front. It's really good.
Okay, you said down the stretch, and I'm going to pose a question to you in just a minute, but I know that Lumen Field is going to be rocking on Sunday, which is why my noise-canceling headphones are going to be of the utmost importance, because I literally can't hear myself think. This NFL season, feel every play, every hit, every moment with the Sony 1000 XM5 noise-canceling headphones, the official headphones of the Seattle Seahawks. With premium noise cancellation, you are in the zone. No distractions, just pure football. Whether you're in your living room or on the go, you'll never miss a beat with Sony headphones. And while I'm thinking about it, I think we need to get a little bit of insight from our fantasy insider, Scott Engel.
Thanks, Jen and John. Here we are in the fantasy playoffs. Don't let the pressure get to you. Don't overthink things. Go with the starters that brought you here. You've gotten this far. Don't obsess over certain lineup decisions. Make the best informed decisions and just go with them. Don't worry about who the other team has. You can't control that. Hopefully, Zach Charbonnet boosted you into the fantasy playoffs, the number one fantasy running back of Week 14 with 38.4 fantasy points. If he's pressed into an expanded role again this week, you have to start him. Keep checking Seahawks.com to see what the running back injury situation is. Other running backs to strongly consider for this week, Rico Dowdle is a must start. 2 consecutive 100-yard games, and the Dallas Cowboys have a top 5 offensive line pass blocking matchup grade on Pro Football Focus this week against the Carolina Panthers. Also, if you need a flex, top 25 guy to stream, Sincere McCormick of the Raiders will now be the lead running back for Las Vegas, and he has a good matchup this week as well. At wide receiver, you want a piece, fantasy-wise, of that Buffalo-Detroit game, you have to go with Khalil Shakir as a must-start fantasy wide receiver 3. He has an excellent wide receiver quarterback matchup grade against Buffalo on Pro Football Focus for this week. Also, you got to go back to Darnell Mooney. He's got a great matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders, coming off a career-high 142 receiving yards, and he has over 85 receiving yards in 4 of his last 6 games. At quarterback, you want to go with Tua Tagovailoa. The Houston Texans have allowed the most passing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks with 26. Go to Seahawks.com, news, fantasy insiders. We have more recommended starters for you. Your top 12 fantasy insurance running backs that you need to pick up for the fantasy playoffs, defensive streamers for week 15 and 16, a lot more. And also check out my lineup rankings at rotoballer.com. Back to you, Jen and John, for week 15, Packers versus Seahawks.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Okay. I know everybody has their own measures of what makes a good playoff team or a good team down the stretch. Again, in reading about this matchup, and you go strength on strength, there's a lot of people that are saying, look at what Jordan Love is doing for the second straight year late in the year. It's the quarterback who makes the biggest difference during this point of the year and in the playoffs. And I say, I don't know about that. Like, you need a good quarterback, but back to what you were saying about the defensive line, John, wouldn't you rank a solid defense or a solid run game ahead of the quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, depends on degrees of how good is this defensive line, where's the quarterback at. Like, you still, no matter how good you are in a run game and defense, you still need good quarterback play to be successful, because it's that position, just the nature of it, you're controlling so much. The quarterback's got to do his job. But yes, if you can run the ball like the Seahawks did last game, if you have a defense playing like the way the Seahawks is, you sure can ease that burden on the quarterback, and you're not asking him to do nearly as much, which we saw that Geno Smith played great against Arizona, but there was way less on his plate of, like, you don't have to throw 40 times, throw for 350 yards.
Well, I would also say, especially in the case of the Packers, I just want my quarterback to have good decision-making skills, right? Because you're playing in crappy weather for most of the time in that conference at this time of year. I don't need you to be the superstar. What I need is for my run game to be going and my defense to be right where the Seahawks defense is.
I mean, it's what every coach will tell you when they talk about complementary football. Like, it is really hard to win consistently when you have to lean incredibly hard on one aspect of your game, whether it's the quarterback playing out of his mind or the defense just completely shutting the team out. Like, that's, you can't win consistently that way, or you rarely can win consistently that way in the NFL. So it's when you're getting all those things working together, that's how you be a really good, dangerous football team.
Speaking of complementary football, that's the way I always thought the Ravens looked right? The last couple of years. There's no let up. And I think we saw a great example of that in Arizona. Defense forces the turnover, offense comes, it's quick change, you score. Defense forces another turnover, and then the offense gets points off of that too. It's one of those where the opponent doesn't have any room to catch their breath. It is going back and forth. And we saw that with Baltimore, and now I think that's kind of where we are. And to me, that's part of complementary football. It shows up in time of possession, but it's also what's that overall feeling and intensity during the course of the game.
Yeah, for sure. I'm greedy, and I really wanted to just bury him there last week when they had that position at the end of the half, and then they got the ball to start the second half. I was like, man, they could have really blown that up. But hey, they did more than enough to win that game. You beat a good team by double digits on the road. That's a great win.
Well, look, here's the other thing. It is a division opponent. These teams know each other very well. It was very fluky. I think with the Packers, you have some idea of what to expect, and we know that there have been some, I'm just going to say fluky games and plays against the Packers at Lumen Field. I know.
No, totally normal football
It's just totally normal. It's just some of the best highlights in Seahawks history that you are ever going to see. I kind of hope that we're not leaning that direction. I do know, though, it's not just the Packers, but upcoming on the schedule, it's the Packers, the Vikings, the Bears. There's a very similar style of football that gets played, and it's going to be on display with the Pack.
They play a great brand of football. They play winning football. They've been doing it throughout their entire franchise history, and especially since Matt's got there and doing his thing. So we got a lot of respect for them and how they play. They're a physical football team. They play really hard. They attack the football. They take care of it on offense. They do all the things necessary that you need to do to be a really good football team. They do those things.
Mike McDonald talking about the Packers. We are broadcasting from the Seahawks podcast studio presented by Sony, the official headphones partner of the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, so the Packers, they can clinch a playoff spot this weekend.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about how they've had no bad losses.
Yeah.
Why does it matter?
Well, I think
because I'm going to tell you this, they haven't necessarily had great wins either, if we're going to count it that way.
Yeah. But yeah, people want to look at, here's the teams they've lost to. The record, I think the teams they've lost to have a combined 5 losses. So the thought is they've only lost to the best teams in the league, and otherwise they're right up there, which you can make that argument, but I don't think that makes them unbeatable.
Well, I'm going to say this. They beat Chicago by 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Jacksonville by 3 points. And that was a high-scoring game for a Jacksonville team that hasn't been able to do a whole lot. And against Indy, granted it was early in the year, they scored just 16 points. I would say they have some wins that are not good. Also, I'm not interested in going down the row,
that
result
just doesn't
by
work in the
sport.
NFL.
It doesn't, and I'm not interested in doing that on either side. I'm really curious to see how this matchup plays out.
Can I take us on a slight detour from something I heard from Mike McDonald?
Yes.
He talked about they've done it forever in their history. I'm going to use that as a moment to plug Mike Holmgren's Hall of Fame candidacy because he was just named a finalist. Yes, the Packers have a rich history. Go look at their history between the 60s and when Mike Holmgren got there. It was not very good.
Yeah.
He turned them around. I mean, they were like a Super Bowl, the early NFL champions in the 60s. Didn't do much of anything until Holmgren got there over a 20-plus year span.
It was
came to Seattle, turned that franchise around. So I'm just saying, for the Hall of Fame voters, get him in.
Yep.
He deserves it.
He does indeed. He was around the practice facility
this week. He walked through the locker room, watching everyone kind of flock to him. It's cool. Geno Smith comes up to him.
Yeah.
He commands a lot of respect.
Yeah, I was going to say, and he has a presence. When he walks into the room, you know that Coach Holmgren is in the room. Let me also say this, kind of on that same vein. We have heard references to the Seahawks past so many times in the last 4 or 5 weeks, whether it's bringing back the Legion of Boom style of practices and accountability, whether it's the run game and what they did with Marshawn, who also was at the practice facility this week, or kind of the lessons learned. I do want to point out that culture is still ingrained, right? It hasn't gone away because there was a fear, I think, or maybe a concern or questions about, well, what happens to the Seahawks history and do they still care about what happened under previous coaches? Yeah, it hasn't gone away, whether it was Kobe Bryant paying tribute to Marshawn or any number of things. It is still very much ingrained what Seahawks football looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back to the introductory press conference from Mike McDonald, and he and John Schneider talked about that. This is not a coaching change where you need to come in and make a culture change. The culture was great here. you still have the same front office. You have a lot of the same business office people. Like the building, the culture in the building is a lot like what Pete Carroll and John Schneider, and through them, Paul Allen as well, built here. And I mean, really, you can go back to the Holmgren era too. It started with him, but this was Mike Macdonald came in to help get some football things cleaned up, but this was not a total overhaul of the program. And you can feel that connection to it. Mike Macdonald still embraces that because he understands like that's important. These guys are a big part of this team's history. So yeah, we're gonna see Marshawn Lynch out there. We saw Cam. We saw Sherm out there during training camp. So that's still going to be there for this organization.
Well, Mike Macdonald's also a football junkie.
Yeah.
And he appreciates good football. And I'm sure he's watched
Cam
those
Chancellor
highlights.
was here and was training out, the way he talked about, like, he was just like a fan, like, oh man, that's Cam Chancellor.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, it is cool to have all of that. And again, some of the greatest moments in Seahawks history have come against the Packers. We need to talk about JSN. We need to talk about what the Seahawks need to do for a win. But first, let's pause for a word from our presenting sponsor.
Statistically, the world is losing color. Just consider all-white kitchens, beige baby nurseries, a sea of gray cars. But in the hundreds of destinations Delta flies to, you can rediscover color in the bright blue waters of Hawaii, the emerald green hills of Scotland, the berry pink cherry blossoms of Tokyo, and so much more. Sometimes opening your world is all it takes to open your mind, which is why when you fly Delta, your potential takes off when you do. Delta, official airline of the Seattle Seahawks.
We're broadcasting from the Seahawks podcast studio presented by Sony, the official headphones partner of the Seattle Seahawks. And we probably waited too long to talk about JSN. But I'm going to say this is another strength on strength, John.
Yeah.
The way that Jackson Smith-Njigba has been playing, the leading receiver for 6 straight games for the Seahawks. But when you look at the Packers, while they are giving up a fair amount of yards in the air, that secondary is really good at taking the ball away. Their turnover differential is among the best in the league. Second most interceptions and most points off of takeovers. Takeovers. I'd like to take over. That's really what I would like for it to be called. Takeaways and or turnovers, or the new stat that I just
Takeovers,
created is takeovers.
I'm going to put that in a story this week.
Well, you can take over a game, John, so I don't think I'm that far off.
Yes.
And we have seen JSN essentially take over a game with some of these jaw-dropping plays.
Well, I think it starts with just his competitiveness, and the guy's really, just a great competitor, so he's kind of relentless in that matter. But like skill set-wise, we've talked about it in the offseason. He's got great hands, and then like the lower body, like power and flexibility of getting in and out of breaks. It's tough to stick with him. And then, like I said earlier, as he's starting to make more catches and stuff, I think he's generating a chemistry with Geno, like late in downs and stuff, finding open windows and zones, and Geno's finding them.
As you mentioned, 6 straight games leading the team in receiving. He's got 592 yards, 4 touchdowns over that span. He's up to 6th in the entire NFL in receiving. Like he's
crazy because DK was like
DK was like top 3 before his injury.
Yeah,
and it's good segue mentioning DK. One thing that Mike Macdonald talked about a little bit, and JSN would be the first to say is too, like the way teams defend DK Metcalf very much plays into what JSN is doing. And that's not to take away from Njigba. Like he had 180 yards with DK Metcalf injured, so that's not saying that's the only reason. But like if you watch the way teams, even when DK Metcalf is not getting the most targets currently, teams are putting so much effort into taking the deep ball away from him because he's such a downfield threat that it's creating other opportunities. And Geno Smith and Jackson Smith-Njigba are really taking advantage.
Well, and DK is not just like taking on the double teams and just letting them take him out of the game. He's making guys pay. He is a physical wide receiver.
Yeah, I tweeted this during the game. I was like, I don't know if I've ever seen a like Pro Bowl caliber receiver who just seems to really enjoy run blocking. He gets into it.
He does. Well, his dad was an offensive lineman, so that's
he pointed
part
that out.
of
It's
it.
like, where's that come from? Well, my dad was an NFL lineman.
Yeah,
you kind of inherit that mentality a little bit.
Well, and he loved Sean Merriman. He wanted to be able to hit like Sean Merriman. That's one of the things that he said before the season started. And I'm like, well, that is different for a wide receiver. They're usually trying to avoid those sorts of things. He's looking for that contact. And I also want to go back to the point we made. DK's fine with JSN getting the touches.
Yeah.
Tyler Lockett, I would love to see Lockett get a little bit more involved, but he's there as a threat.
Yeah. And he hasn't been getting the targets lately, but teams still have to respect him. And it's still, when those three guys are on the field together, that's really hard for defenses to decide how they want to do it.
Well, and if you're going to scoop the ball up off the turf with a grass blade,
so
a blade
impressive.
of grass in between, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He's gotten some not quite circus catches, but degree of difficulty.
How many receivers would just go to the ground there to make sure they catch it? But he's like, no, I can scoop it and go
I can do that,
and go run 10 more yards after the catch. He's a complete package. He is a great receiver.
He has been really fun to watch. And the Seahawks are going to need all of that playmaking this week against the Packers. They're probably going to need a few more things. John, what do you got? What are the 2 things you need to see from the Seahawks?
I want to end Jordan Love's interceptionless streak. The Seahawks have been taking the ball away at a pretty high rate lately.
7 straight games, I think?
I think so. Sounds about right. I'll go with that.
Yep.
But yeah, let's get another interception or 2.
Okay.
Get the takeaways. And then I just want to see the run game keep doing what's doing. And you gave me a hard time for being greedy when I said, let's rush for about
I actually thought about that on the sidelines.
And I joked, let's make it 140, and you're laughing. No, 176. No, but we don't need 176. I'll take it if we can get it. But just have that threat of a run game to, help the offensive line out, help Geno out, and just, be able to move the ball on the ground.
Yeah, I would say this, and this might sound really basic, but I want the Seahawks to score first because Green Bay has been really good at jumping out to an early lead, not just in the game, but scoring on the opening drive of the second half. When they do that, they are in control. They're 7-1 when they get out to an early lead, I think is that number. I shouldn't have said that because now you're going to quote me on it, and I actually need to go back and look that one up. But I want the early lead against the Packers. Do not let them get comfortable. And I could say I want red zone defense to keep maintaining the level they're at, because during this 5-game stretch, they are 12th at converting touchdowns in the red zone. But I'm actually going to say Jalen Darden.
Yeah.
Let's get some good return yards.
Yeah.
He's a fun little, kind of quiet, kind of understated, was
yeah,
literally meeting teammates and coaches on the sidelines during the game.
We asked him yesterday, could you have named everybody who blocked for you on Sunday? He's like, no. He's like, I'm working on that. But he got here late Friday. He didn't even practice Friday. He got here after practice Friday, got on the plane with the team Saturday, and go return punts and kicks the next day. So
and he's like, it's just plug him. Just tell me what you want me to do. And also, I was like, I love doing it. Not everybody can do it. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. I'm good with it. Like, okay, well, how about if we break a return in front of the 12s?
Love it.
That's what I got. Another big play. I am sure that this is going to be another one for the highlight reel, maybe even record books. It is a primetime matchup. On Sunday, there'll be plenty to talk about next week, which is when we will be back with a brand new episode of the Seahawks Insiders Podcast.